Hello, everyone. Okay, welcome. As you get logged in, you'll see a survey on the screen. If you could take a second to fill it out, that'd be great. Also, you can drop in the chat where you're calling in from, and we'll get started in just a minute to allow some more people to flow in. And while we wait, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Madison Burnett, and I'm a BCBA. I lead our professional development program, and I'll be available to support you guys throughout the webinar. In addition to that role, I work alongside other BCBAs on our clinician-led recruitment team, and I support in the effort of recruiting quality professionals to join our team. If you're interested in joining MPG, please indicate so in the post-webinar survey that everybody will fill out at the end of this webinar, or you can email careers@manhattanpsychologygroup.com. All right, we've had a lot of people answer the poll so far, so thank you. Give just another few seconds before I end it. All right. So the majority of everybody has attended our webinar before. There's about a quarter of people that are new. So welcome to everybody that's new, and welcome back for everybody that has joined us before. I'm going to end the survey now so we can get started with today's presentation. Okay. So can you click onto the next slide? Perfect. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about Manhattan Psychology Group. We were established in 2011 and have continued to grow. Our team consisting of adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, behavior analysts, special educators, licensed social workers, and ABA therapists. As a team, we're committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services from mental health and testing to ABA and educational services. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. We provide services to clients out of our Upper West Side office and our Long Island City office in-home, schools, and clinic-based settings, as well as through telehealth. Our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages and in diverse settings. We're also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars for parents and professionals where we'll continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at MPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. Our mission is to provide a multidisciplinary integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. All right, next we're going to go on to some housekeeping information about CEUs. For those seeking CEUs for this presentation, you'll need to collect the code word stated and complete the post-webinar survey. We'll post the codes on the screen and say them verbally. However, once we say them and move on, we will not be coming back. We will send out a post-webinar survey in the last 10 minutes of the presentation for you to get your CEU. Any polls during this webinar are not required to get your CEU, but they are encouraged. We will be leaving the chat open, but please post any questions you have in the Q&A so we can make sure that they are seen. Okay, now I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Sudha Ramaswamy is a licensed and a doctoral level board certified behavior analyst and a Fulbright scholar with extensive experience working with children who have developmental disabilities. She has several years of clinical experience in the applied setting, beginning at the Fred S. Keller School in Yonkers, New York, and is currently an associate professor of special education at Mercy College, where she's been teaching since 2006. She teaches graduate level courses in early childhood and special education, as well as coordinates the coursework sequence that leads to the Behavior Analyst Certification Board credential. She has been published in the Global Education Review and has also served as its theme editor. And finally, I'd like to hand it over to you, Sudha.
Well, thank you so much, Madison, for the lovely intro. And thank you all for attending today. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. In fact, I was just telling Madison this. Last year, I went to India for a week to a town called Bangalore and gave a training on this topic, the science of reading, and in particular, reading mastery, which is a curriculum I'm going to dive into in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here with a little bit of history on this topic. Okay, can I click? There we go. All right, so Teaching children how to read is a particularly important skill. It's critical, as it results in a lot of negative consequences for children, including high rates of school dropout, poverty, and underemployment. In the United States, youth literacy issues are exacerbated by factors such as race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status, turning literacy into a social justice concern. National data shows that a significant percentage of fourth graders lack reading proficiency, with disparities among racial and ethnic groups. This actually widened significantly between 2019 and 2024, especially confounded by the pandemic. The school to prison pipeline, a troubling trend, illustrates how certain school policies disproportionately push marginalized students, particularly students of color, into the criminal justice system, which makes teaching literacy in the right manner from a very early stage particularly important. Okay. I know this is having a little difficulty going from slide to slide. Okay. All right, so let me talk a little bit about educational marginalization, as defined by UNESCO, is a persistent disadvantage rooted in social inequalities. Factors like economic, social, and structural issues contribute to literacy underachievement among marginalized students. Out-of-school factors like poverty, family dynamics, and health issues also impact literacy achievement. And this gap has extensive consequences, including higher dropout rates and limited economic opportunities. So early and structured literacy instruction is crucial for marginalized students to bridge this gap. I'm not saying that ideal literacy instruction, highly effective literacy instruction, is the only way to solve this problem. It is one, as I've described here, many factors that contribute to underachievement with marginalized students, but it is one way that we can control, right, in our classrooms. Okay, so let me talk to you about the federal response to this achievement gap. This is not a new issue. The federal government has launched various initiatives over decades, many decades, to address the literacy achievement gap. Initiatives have differed in focus, some targeting poverty, some with funding, some with clear instructional plans, and not so much with others. And so the issue has been addressed in many different ways because of the many issues that have resulted in inequity in literacy instruction, which I talked about in the previous slide. However, conflicting political perspectives have led to a lack of a unified approach and limited changes in literacy achievement. So disagreements over instructional approaches, so I'm talking about philosophical ones like whole language versus phonics, have also deepened the rift in addressing this issue. Okay, so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the political, historical background here, as well as some of the results of that. So in the 1960s, President Johnson launched something called the War on Poverty. So 1960s, so clearly this is not a new issue, although I'm sure you've heard in the news lately, especially over the last 2 years, especially with the program that Lucy Calkins had in the New York City schools, all of that being kind of dismantled over the last couple of years. The issues related to literacy instruction across the country. So, but this is not a new issue. That's what I'm getting at. So in the 1960s, President Johnson launched the War on Poverty, and this included a report that was written called the Equality of Educational Opportunity Study, led by someone named Coleman. Hence, the report is called the Coleman Report, which highlighted factors beyond racial differences in school resources affecting achievement gaps. So, not only is this an issue that's caused by racial differences, that's exacerbated by racial differences, that school resources and equity of instruction contribute to this issue. So we need to take a closer look at that. That was in the 60s. Then Project Follow Through in the 60s and 70s evaluated various programs. There is reading programs in different schools. So this was a huge program over 10 years, which also involved testing of DI curricula, so direct instruction curricula, which is going to be the focus of my talk today. The results of that huge study showed that DI reading programs had superior outcomes for students who were enrolled in those programs as part of that huge study, but the programs were not adopted, and that happened because of many reasons, including political ones. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 was aimed at educational equity, with programs like NIE and the Right to Read program. And then in 1997, which is relatively recently, emphasized evidence-based reading instruction. But these, the debate over instructional methods persisted, contributing to the widening gap. Okay, so how does the science of reading fill the gap? So research in the science of reading identifies key foundational skills necessary for students to become skilled readers. 4 national inquiries in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Australia provide practice recommendations consistent with the science of reading, emphasizing systematic and explicit teaching of phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. These are the big 5. If you read articles on this topic, those are the big 5 components of SOR, science of reading. The science of reading benefits from an expanding evidence base informed by decades of research using the scientific method across various fields. Practitioners can enhance teaching effectiveness by utilizing research from the science of behavior to inform instructional practices, tactics, and procedures in reading, instruction, and assessment. Okay. So let's talk about the different components of SOR. So the phonics emphasis. The science of reading places a strong emphasis on phonics instruction, recognizing the importance of teaching students the relationship between sounds and letters. It also advocates for a structured literacy approach, which involves systematic, explicit, and sequential teaching of concepts, right? So when I say sequential teaching, that's a mindfulness and awareness of a scope and sequence of skills that need to be taught. And so that is evident in the science of reading approaches. Evidence-based practices. So the science of reading is grounded in research-backed strategies and practices that have been shown to be effective in teaching reading skills, such as explicit teaching of phonological awareness. So you're not looking at what is the latest fad in schools, what is the coolest and catchiest thing to adopt for schools. It is based on research-based strategies. It also highlights the significance of early intervention and systematic instruction for struggling readers, aiming to identify and address reading difficulties as early as possible to prevent long-term reading challenges, which is so critical, right? Because as you know, with the young learners that you work with, the longer history of poor instruction that students get, the harder it is to undo those faulty prerequisite repertoires. And so there's a huge emphasis in SOR to start early. And the SOR also promotes a comprehensive understanding of reading that encompasses both foundational skills like decoding and phonics and higher order skills such as comprehension strategies and vocabulary development, recognizing that proficient reading involves a combination of various abilities, right? It's not a narrow approach. It sees reading as consisting of many different component skills and having to teach all of them systematically with a scope and sequence at the right time for the students. Okay, so let's talk about the intersection of science of behavior and applied behavior analysis. Okay, so the science of behavior focuses on the individual's behavior within specific contexts rather than the person as the cause of behavior. And so what do I mean by specific context as it relates to science of reading? The context is the instruction, right? Like that is the material that we're presenting the student, the elements that make it effective, right? That is the context. Research and practice in the science of behavior use functional and contextual approaches such as ABA and contextual behavior science. Behavioral research in reading emphasizes an objective, observable, and measurable approach. Single case experimental designs are used to systematically observe pre-intervention, reading behavior, implement intervention, and then assess the effectiveness of treatment. Behaviorally based instructional approaches in reading emphasize systematic and explicit methods aligned with ABA and contextual behavior science. DI reading programs and curriculum-based measures are examples of behaviorally based approaches that focus on observable and measurable reading behaviors. I'm going to dive deeper into DI, direct instruction, but I just want to say that there are many different curricula that align with the philosophy of SOR. DI is the one I'm focusing on today. And then within DI reading curricula, there are actually many different types of reading curricula available. I'm going to be focusing on one called Reading Mastery. Curriculum-based measures developed using ABA principles involve direct observation of behavior using single case analytic procedures. And DI reading programs use validated behavior analytic procedures like task analysis, breaking down the scale, right? Instructional hierarchy, skills that are taught, that need to be taught earlier, prerequisite repertoires before building on those foundational skills, and learning trial elements for efficient transfer of stimulus control, meaning you're not going to start with too big of a bite. You're going to start with little bites and then gradually build up the repertoires so that the student is efficient in their reading acquisition. So instructional hierarchy, what does this mean? And think about, like, I would love, as we are doing this webinar together, for you to think about, how does this relate to what you do in your students in one-to-one programming, right? Instructional hierarchy is something that you think about and do in your one-to-one ABA programs, right? Instructional hierarchy identifies teaching tactics to support accurate student responding across stages of knowledge, right? We always, as behavior analysts, we go into our instruction, we like to think ahead with a roadmap of where skills start and where we want to take our students. And there are often many steps in the path, right, to achieve our goal, our end goal. And DI involves that same instructional hierarchy. There are teaching tactics that support accurate student responding across many stages of knowledge, so that students acquire skills, they are fluent, they're able to generalize, they're able to adapt those skills. It's amazing how the curriculum has actually been developed and how beautifully children learn with it and how they're able to generalize those reading skills that they learn to all settings, different types of reading materials, and content instruction too. Learning trial elements in direct instruction include antecedents, behaviors, consequences. So you'll see all of that within DI reading curricula. And I'm going to show you examples of the script so you'll see exactly what it is that the teacher says. What is the expectation for a student response? If there's an error, what are the consequences? If there's a correct response, is there feedback? Yes, there is. So we're going to talk about what those look like in DI. I'm going to show you the script. Behavior analytic procedures ensure systematic teaching where student learning builds on mastered skills and progresses efficiently. So we're not giving the student too much to learn at the very beginning. We're taking baby steps and then we gradually build on those skills. Reviews of reading research consistently favor behaviorally based instructional practices, with DI being reported as the most effective approach. DI consists of scientifically validated behavior analytic procedures such as task analysis, instructional hierarchy, and learning trial elements. These procedures ensure systematic and effective teaching of reading, targeting specific stages of learning and allowing efficient progression in student learning. Okay, so let's think about the relationship of DI and ABA. So just a little refresher here on the dimensions of ABA. 7 dimensions, right? Behavioral. So we're focusing on observable and measurable behavior. Applied, making a difference that's important to the student. Of course, we're giving them literacy skills that will broaden their, their community of reinforcers, broaden their audience with whom they can communicate, right? So there's most certainly social importance here. Analytic, how are we demonstrating relationships between reading behavior and instruction, right? That's the analytic aspect of DI. Conceptually systematic, relating procedures to behavioral principles. Technological, procedures are clear and replicable. Effective, behavioral techniques are going to result in a socially significant change. Last but not least, generality. When students acquire skills through DI, are they able to take these skills and engage in reading repertoires in their classrooms, on tests, in higher grades? Absolutely, yes. Okay, so this is one of my favorite slides. So it kind of provides the framework for the rest of the talk. So I'm going to take you through how reading mastery, direct instructions, reading mastery curricula hits all of these 8 aspects to create a design of effectiveness. So what is it that makes it so effective? These 8 qualities make it extremely effective, and that is part of the design of DI, part of the design, obviously, of reading mastery. So first and foremost, placing students at their performance level. We meet children where they are not far behind, not too ahead, right? I'll talk about what that looks like in DI. In DI, we elicit frequent student responses. So this notion of opportunity to respond related to opportunity to provide feedback, and therefore we're going to get more learning, right? Number 3, modeling new skills and concepts. Number 4, immediate corrections by the teacher. 5, high passing criteria. Number 6, incremental increase in difficulty and complexity. Number 7, judicious review of what's being taught and how students are responding. And then number 8, integrating skills and concepts into more complex applications. So I just want to leave the slide for a few seconds for you to think about, how do you do these 8 things with your students in your ABA one-to-one programs, right? Like, how do you do these in your typical programs? I think you do all of these. I'm pretty sure you do all of these every day when you work with your students, right? We do this in DI as well, and I'm going to show you how. Okay, so let's talk about instructional content of DI. Phonological awareness. So do you remember earlier in the webinar, I said these 5 things are important. These are the big 5. This is how I'm going to talk about what these things are, okay? These components. Phonological awareness, the ability to hear and manipulate sounds and words. Alphabetic principle, the ability to associate sounds with letters and use these sounds to read words. Automaticity and fluency with the code involves effortlessness. Their responses are automatic, the automatic ability to read words and connected text. Why is this important? Why is automaticity so important? Think about the students that you work with when they respond in classrooms, when teachers deliver antecedents to the group. The response time, that latency, is so short. It's quick. Children need to be able to read and respond quickly. So automaticity is really critical. That's incorporated into DI reading. Vocabulary development, the ability to understand. That's the receptive aspect, and to use and speak expressively words to acquire and convey meaning. Comprehension involves the interaction between the reader and the text to extract meaning. Okay, so this is the first bullet point on that list of 8, right? Placing students at their performance level. So, you know, when we work with our students in our ABA programs, do we do assessment? Yes. Do we see what their current skill levels are? Yes. Do we try to figure out what the repertoires are needed, or if there's some faulty prerequisite skills that need to be addressed? We address them at their level, right? We address children at the level, and DI reading does the same thing. So DI curricula offer placement tests for all their curricula. So this includes math. So I'm focused on reading today, but DI curricula offers math, science, social studies, all of it. So we with the DI curricula can offer placement tests to our students, which then give us results that tell us exactly where to place the students. So if we're giving a 4th grade placement test and we find a lot of errors, that will guide us the results will guide us to exactly where the student needs to be. Does it need to be second grade? Does it need to be third grade? And actually all of those are scripted out on the placement tests too. So if students make, X number of errors, then start here. If you have no errors, but reading, fluency is blah, 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 then start here. So all of it is scripted out, actually for you. So children are not grouped by grade or age. They're not grouped by standardized tests. Why is this important? Let's take a second to think about why is it important to place based on their level versus their actual skill level versus grade? It's important because you're teaching them what they need to fill their own gaps, right? You're not teaching them because they're in third grade. And this is the issue that we find in classrooms, right? Most classrooms, teachers are under a lot of pressure to meet the standards. They're teaching one level. If it's third grade, it's third grade. You got to teach that level because that's what your principal's asking you to do. That's what the state standards are mandating you to do. But DI lets you differentiate. It allows you to offer placement tests, place children at the right level, and then proceed with the teaching. If you have students who come in the middle of the year, they're also going to be placed at their performance level, right? They're not automatically going to be placed at less than 15 out of 30 because they came at the middle of the year. They're going to be given placement tests that provide accurate placement. Okay, so let's talk about the second aspect of what makes the design so effective, which is eliciting frequent student responses. So let's think about what your instruction looks like with your younger students who get ABA. Hopefully you're delivering trials at a high rate, right? When you provide instruction at a fast rate, students are responding. If they're responding with errors, you're correcting. If they're responding with correct responses, you're providing a lot of good feedback, right? And the same thing happens with DI. There's an emphasis on fast responding. So there's high interaction, which allows teachers to assess student performance and adjust instruction on an ongoing basis. Historically, this curricula, so all DI curricula was meant to be delivered in groups, but in our ABA programming, we often use this one-to-one. But in a group, there's unison responding, there's choral responding in a group. Responses are indicators of time on task. So how long are children spending on various tasks? Simple tasks allow for more frequent responses more than complex tasks. More think time is needed with new and complex tasks, which can vary by student. So what does that mean? Think about, how long it takes to respond to what day is it versus a division problem. The think time is different. And so when think time is different, we have to acknowledge that. We have to allow for that with our students. And that is part of DI instruction, making those kind of flexible decisions. Okay, so related to what I just said, here's a poll question for you. I think Madison's going to start the poll. Which oral question would require the longest amount of think time for an average student to answer? Okay. So let's see, most of you said 35 times 8. Yes, this is what I predicted. Unless you're really, really good at those multiplication facts. So 35 times 8, yes, that would take the longest time. And can I share these? Yes. Okay. So with DI, there's consideration for think time. Okay. Signals and unison responses also impact how fast students get their instruction and how fast you as the teacher provide instruction. Okay. So in DI, There are many different signals that are used. There are ways to speed up and slow down your instruction. There's so much to talk about this one topic of signals and responses that is beyond the scope of this webinar. But just to give you a brief little, intro to that. Signals make instruction efficient and effective. Every student initiates their own response. That prevents kids from looking at each other and copying, right? Every student practices a task. They're not relying on individual turns. Every student makes hundreds of responses by the end of the lesson. Mistakes can be heard and corrected immediately, and signals are either visual or audible. That depends on the exercise. This is going to make a little bit more sense when I show you the script and model for you what this looks like. Okay, so in DI, there are scripts. So whether it's reading, science, social studies, there are scripts and formats that are used to teach the instruction. Now, actually, using scripts is you'll find a criticism of DI, a criticism of ABA, a criticism of teaching for people who believe that teachers need to be more creative. But I would argue that with an evidence-based approach such as DI reading, the script has been developed based on what we know students need about reading, right? What they need to learn in terms of reading. And so stick to the script, because that will give you the step-by-step approach to systematically building skills over time. So in the script, everything teachers and students say and do is specified. The language of instruction is consistent from day to day. What do we know about our children with autism? They love the predictability. So there's less confusion and distraction for students. This is the same reason why we deliver our instructional antecedents consistently, right? With our other type of ABA programming, right? We don't deliver our antecedents completely differently day to day. That would confuse our students. And for the same reason, we find the language of instruction that is consistent is what helps our students learn better. The script is efficient for the teacher. Why is that? You're not creating stuff every day. You are following this guide. Your preparation time is minimized. Scripts are organized into formats or patterns of teaching steps. Over time, the formats change to include less structure and more independence of the skill. And scripts allow for teacher showmanship. So what do I mean by that? This is not something that you have to follow like a robot. Like you can infuse your personality into teaching. You should not be reading in a very kind of boring way from the script. You need to be engaging children, right? So you want to, infuse your personality, make it fun, make it interesting for the students to want to respond, right? So I'm going to show you an example. I'll read from the script. You'll see on the right, just to orient you a little bit to the script, I'm going to tell you what this is about. This is just a little snippet from lesson 1 of Reading Mastery Grade 1. So you'll see in green, the title is there, lesson 1. This particular exercise is on sounds. The blue script is what the teacher says. And as you can see, like, just take a second, take a couple minutes, like look at a couple of seconds to look at that script. You'll see sounds firm up, point to the sounds, tell me these sounds. When I touch it, you say it. Those are all written there for you. These are part of the script. There's very little confusion on what you need to say or what you need to expect from the children. So here I go. I'm going to read the script. So as I'm pointing to sounds, I don't have the whole script. I don't have the whole book that I would show the students to show you here on this webinar, but I'm going to pretend. So I'm pointing to sounds. Tell me the sounds. When I touch it, you say it. Keep on saying it as long as I touch it. And then I'm pointing to each sound. When I point to each sound, I say, get ready. And I point to a sound, the child says it, get ready. Pointing to another sound, get ready. And then the children have to respond, and you're delivering reinforcement or corrections. Now, how to deliver corrections, how to model responses, all of that requires, I would say, another like several weeks of training and learning. That would be the subject of another training. But just to give you an idea, I wanted to show you that script. I hope that makes sense. So that's, again, lesson 1 from Reading Mastery grade 1. This actually goes up to grade 5. Okay, here's the first code word. So as you were instructed early on, you know what to do with this. Okay. Hopefully everyone's paying attention. Okay. So as I said earlier, the blue type indicates what the teacher says. This type right here. And then the second point here, this type indicates what the teacher does. So in the parentheses, you see how it's not in the blue color anymore, but it's just written text. Signal. So what sound do these letters usually make? So there are so many signals in DI reading, different types of signals, and the signals vary from level to level. Typically for Reading Mastery level 1, this particular lesson, I would use a finger snap, but you could clap, you could put your hand on the table, some kind of auditory cue for the child to respond. So here are some letters that go together. Get ready to tell me the sound they usually make, and then you're pointing, the teacher's pointing. That's why it's not in blue, but it's just a direction to the teacher. What sound do these letters usually make? And then your signal. Yes, R. And then you're repeating with the sound combinations that are listed below. Now, how do you as the teacher know how to say these things, right? You would have to, I would strongly recommend you attend a training on this particular topic. I'm going to talk later on about where you can access this type of training. In fact, there's a huge conference that happens every year in Eugene, Oregon, and they do an amazing job with their workshops, training on the different levels. So I'll get back to that later. But in order to deliver the script accurately, you need to be trained on how to do that. You can't just pick up the script and read from it and expect to do everything correctly. Okay. So let's talk about modeling new skills and concepts. So as you do with your students in your ABA programs, you often model, right? So what shape is this? Triangle. Clap your hands, and you clap before the child claps. We use modeling a lot in our ABA programming. We do that in DI reading as well. So let me show you what that looks like. So here's an example of how a teacher models, and the vocal antecedent that the teacher delivers before that is usually my turn or listen. So here, I'm going to read from the script, okay? My turn to say a word slowly. First I'll say, then I'll say, at. Listen again. First I'll say, then I'll say, at. Here I go, at. Do it with me. First you'll say, then you'll say, at. Get ready. So do you see how I modeled it with the words? In this case, I said, my turn, right? Then here I go, here I go. And then you'll say, right? So the students know exactly what to do, what to say. So this is just an example of modeling new skills. This is a critical component that is used throughout the entire DI curriculum. And so this should get you thinking about, for whom is this curriculum going to be effective, right? Because we know very well that some of our students don't imitate responses. So we need to work on developing those prerequisite repertoires for imitation ahead of time. Yes, definitely. There are certainly repertoires that need to be developed prior to implementing such a curriculum, because it uses specific tactics like modeling that need to be learned by the student, right? Need to be effective. So in order for those tactics to be effective, the child needs to have prerequisite observational skills. So think about that too, like how ready are your students for this, and what can you do to prepare them? Now, on that particular topic, I would say there's not that much research yet. I think that there's a lot to be done in that area in terms of learners with autism and what we need to do to help prepare them for our like Reading Mastery type of programs. Another webinar. Okay, so here is another example of modeling. So I'm going to read the script. I want you to think about these questions. So just take a second to look at the slide. So this is RMSE reading level K. This is kindergarten, lesson 34, exercise 2. Again, it's another sound exercise. So I want you to think about how many times did I model the new sound before asking the students to produce the sounds by themselves? How many opportunities did students receive to practice the new sound before being asked to discriminate the new sound from review sounds, right? Like what, it's amazing to see so many ABA theoretical concepts like stimulus control and discrimination come into play because it is embedded every step of the way. So, you know, the kids are asked, they're introduced to a new sound, but then almost immediately they are thrown these variations, right? They're thrown multiple exemplars. Like look at the actual letters, right? They're not all the same, right? The I is in bold, it's a little thinner. The F is written differently at the top than it is on the bottom. This is multiple exemplar instruction at its best, right? So think about how you do that in your ABA programming day to day, right? Like if you're teaching letter identification, you're not presenting one card to the student over and over again. You're presenting it with multiple exemplars. It's a typed A, it's a handwritten A, it's presented on the computer, it's presented on paper, right? And then once they start to learn that response, are you presenting it with others, right? Other letters. Same thing here. You're teaching, you know, you're introducing the skill through modeling, and then you're presenting it with a little bit more difficulty for the student where they have to discriminate. Okay, so I'm going to read the script. Here's a new sound. So what are the questions that you're thinking about right now? You're going to think about how many times did I model the new sound before asking the students to produce the sound by themselves? Here's a new sound. My turn to say it. Get ready. So I'm saying it there, right? So I said it. I'm gonna help you here. I said it once there. My turn again. Get ready. That's the second time, right? My turn again. Get ready. Your turn, get ready. And then I'm going to point to the under the letter and they say it. So how many times did I model the new sound before I said it to the children? Your turn. I'm going to give you a second to think about that. Hopefully all of you got the same answer. That is 3, right? I model it 3 times. Then the next question is, how many opportunities did students receive to practice the new sound before being asked to discriminate the sound? So I'm going to continue. Your turn, get ready. And then they say it. Yes, again, get ready. Pointing underneath, they say yes, Good, saying And then I move on to exercise 2. Get ready to tell me all these sounds. Remember, if a sound has a little arrow under it, you have to say it fast. Don't get fooled. Get ready. And then I'm pointing to these different letters. Yes, and then we go to the F sound, then again, and then D. How you say all of these sounds depends on your training. You have to be trained. I mean, there's one way to say all these sounds. You have to be trained on how to get that accurate. That's, again, basis for another training. But how many opportunities did students receive to practice the new sound before they had to go to exercise, in the bottom exercise 3, where they had to say the other sounds with it? Let's see. They got to practice your turn. That's 1. Again, get ready. Another time, twice, right? And then 3 times, and then they had to do all the other sounds. So they had a chance to practice 3 times before they had to discriminate. So see how this is very systematic. This is done in every DI lesson, whether it's reading mastery or not. Okay. So the benefits, it increases the opportunities for perfect practice. Students show that they know the difference between what was modeled and what was introduced earlier in the program. Okay, let's talk about corrections. So as you all know, working with our students, immediate corrections are really important so that children know what they did wrong and how to do it the right way. And this is a critical component of DI. All errors are corrected immediately, so students perform perfect practice as much as possible, right? They don't make errors over and over again. They are corrected immediately. This is really important. Students repeat material after the correction with delayed tests to ensure mastery. Why are delayed tests important? Well, let me tell you what delayed tests are, first of all. If a student makes an error in reading a sound and then we as the teacher correct them immediately, later on in the lesson, we test them. So you can kind of think of it as a delayed probe. Why would that be important? This is important because you don't want students to just repeat your correction because they're parroting a response. They're just saying what they just heard last. We want to ensure that what they learned through the correction was solidly learned. It's now in their repertoire. And so that's why we do the delayed test, because we can ensure mastery that way. New exercise types are accompanied by scripts with initial error correction procedures, which teachers must commit to memory. So before doing all of this with your students, you have to really take your time, go through training to practice how to implement this correctly. High passing criteria. So let's think about, what do we do in our ABA program typically? Like our criterion for mastery is, I would say, 90%, right, guys? With DI, same idea. High passing criteria so that students are able to retain that information. You're not going to be surprised. I have rarely been surprised at a later lesson. Like, let's say I'm teaching RM1, like I get to lesson 50 and suddenly the child's making tons of mistakes. Like, that rarely happens, because this idea that you are only moving on when the child gets 90% accuracy, and every lesson basically teaches 80 to 90%, I would say 80 to 90% old content, so review, and only 10% new. You're ensuring success, right? You're ensuring errorless instruction. So let's talk about that high passing criteria. So in contrast to conventional instruction, so when I say conventional instruction, I'm talking about non-ABA, non-DI. DI requires a high percentage of correct responses for students to proceed through a program. So think about what happens in most schools. 70 is a passing score. Because DI programs emphasize mastery of the content covered, the passing scores are so much higher. 100% on individual turns, 100% on all the tasks by the end of the lesson, 85% on independent work, 90% on in-program mastery tests. So errors are so infrequent. Kids are going to do great on subsequent lessons. You're never going to be surprised. Like, I have taught this for many, many years. I've taught reading mastery, and I have rarely seen a situation where students need to brush up for more than a week after summer programming, because there's just not that level of regression, because there's so much emphasis on mastery as you go along, because the way you teach is important. Okay, and then these last three ideas that I want to talk about, last three elements that make this a very effective design: incremental increase in difficulty and complexity, judicious review, and integrating skills and concepts into more complex applications. Okay, so this approach assumes that the student must learn each step of a sequence of skills in order to learn a complete skill. And the steps of mastery learning include establishing a sequence of skills, figuring out what the student does not know in that sequence, determining where to begin in the teaching. So this is what earlier in the webinar, I talked about the placement tests. That is based on a sequence of skills. Actually, if you want to do your own, a little bit of research on this, if you look online, the NIFTY website, which is the National Institute for Direct Instruction, you'll see scope and sequence for all their curricula. So reading mastery, grade 2, if you just type in reading mastery, grade 2, scope and sequence, you'll get a PDF that shows all the different skills and how those are taught over time. So the placement tests tell us, where do we teach? Where do we start in that sequence? You teach each sub-skill in the sequence until the student has completely mastered it. And once a subskill has been mastered, you go on to the next subskill in the sequence. And you keep the previously mastered skills on a schedule for review, so they're not forgotten. So think about, how does this relate to your ABA teaching? So I see in a lot of home programs, you have a maintenance, like a bank of maintenance skills that you just run through, or maybe you're using those in your task interspersal to ensure that the student is hanging on to those skills so they're not forgotten. Same thing here. It is just systematically scripted into the program, okay? This program assumes that nothing's taught in one lesson. New material is taught in 2 to 3 consecutive lessons. So that repeated exposure is really important. Material being firmed is in the last 2-3 lessons, and review material is presented as application. Okay, here's your second code word. So make note of it, please. All right. Okay, wow, I got through these slides quicker than I expected. Let me look at the chat for questions. Thank you all.
I have several questions that are in the Q&A section.
Yes.
That'll be great to answer.
Okay. So I'm going to start at the top. First question, why was Calkin's program dismantled? Okay. So Lucy Calkin's program was used for about 2 decades in the New York City schools, and the program was dismantled because it was not leading to consistent results for all students who were in the program. So that's why the program was dismantled. It was not so effective, and then people started to take a look at the different components of the program that were possibly lending itself to its ineffectiveness. So that's why the program was dismantled. Okay, number 2, how do you anticipate this to be incorporated into settings outside of the school environment, such as clinic or home-based settings, where insurance funders are not wanting to cover for academic-based targets? Is there a way to still incorporate this and support our students who are maybe needing a structure like this outside of the school setting? Oh, wow, this is a very good question. So maybe share a little bit more with me, Alexis. What are you targeting in your programs if they're not academic? I don't know if we can get the participants to speak.
I don't think we can. However, if she wants to ask another question in the Q&A, I'd be happy to let you know whenever she does respond, if you want to move on to the next question.
Okay. Is DI only formally implemented in schools? Nope. I have run this program in home programs. So yeah, it can be done in a variety of settings. Okay. Would you say that Wharton-Gillingham program for teaching reading aligns with direct instruction? So the thing with existing programs, I think it would be really difficult to say that all elements of any given reading program are ineffective. I mean, there are some where they're all ineffective, but it's hard to find a program where everything's ineffective. And there are certainly aspects of Wharton-Gillingham that make it effective. And absolutely, yes, teach aligns theoretically with direct instruction. So yes. Would this method not be beneficial for individuals with autism that are nonverbal? So with the reading piece, with the reading mastery piece, I think that it is going to be much more challenging to measure correct responses. But historically, I've taught this program with matching responses. So teaching a student to, press the word in a selection-based response. So they're given options and then they're actually matching to emit a correct response, a reading response. And so that would be the way we measure their accuracy, but not be beneficial I think that reading mastery is going to be harder to measure whether the student has acquired this skill, but there are other DI programs like language for learning that are more where the responses that you measure can be observed receptively versus expressively. So in that regard, I think that you can adopt other types of DI for children who are nonverbal, especially language for learning, where a lot of the instructions early on in that program involve following directions. I'm a BC.
Alexis did answer. If you want to scroll down to the bottom, she's third from the bottom with her response.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, this is challenging, right? Like you're being told by insurance what you can teach when this is a critical skill, reading is a critical skill to teach. So I think the best course of action might be taking some of the evidence base to show that this is a critical skill, like even some of the research that I showed you earlier in the webinar about how poor literacy results in so many negative consequences, and maybe that can help you make a case with insurance. I can help you if you email me. I can help you identify some of that research if you think that might be helpful. Okay, I'm going to go back to the top. Let's see. Okay, so many great questions, guys. Thank you so much. How does DI? Okay, I'm going to go all the way up. Okay, how does DI perform with kids with challenging behaviors? Okay. So this is a good question. Immensely well because of some of these features of fast instruction, opportunity to respond, frequent reinforcement, all of those aspects of behavioral analytic instruction typically help minimize challenging behaviors, right? So it is highly effective for children with challenging behaviors. However, keep in mind that if the challenging behaviors are so disruptive that it is difficult to even deliver an antecedent and give response time that is meaningful for the student to respond, you probably need to work on problem behaviors a little bit first before implementing DI. But that being said, you probably can work on those things simultaneously. I think you could. What is a DI program that can help with math fundamentals? Connecting math concepts. Okay, can you please email me the link? Okay.
I'll handle that one.
Yep. I'm a BCBA and parent of a child with mild autism and ADHD. Thank you, Aaron, for your question. His school does not use effective reading curricula. I want to work with him at home, but don't have money to purchase all the DI curricula. Are they free? Yes, there are. Okay, so there's a wonderful program, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. This is actually written by DI folks, and it is the home version. You can get it for $22.99 on Amazon. And it is amazing. This is what I recommend to parents to help teach their children at home. So teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons. The National Institute for Direct Instruction actually offers parent training on this curriculum. So Aaron, if you could please reach out to me, I would be so happy to share those resources. I actually have another website that I can give you links to with tons of materials for teaching the program. So I will send that to you. Why are students responding yes before responding with the letter sound? Oh, you're talking about, maybe you can give me more of an example of what you mean by that. Like in error, are they saying yes before the sound, or?
I think that question came in when you were going through your example of the letter sounds.
Okay. Let me think. I have to go back to the website, the webinar. You know what? I'm going to come back to that one. I have to
And
go
I
back to
think we have time for one more question.
one more question. Okay, Caitlin, I will take a look at that slide and drop you an email after. Would love to know, okay, Nicole, would love to know if they're DI curriculum. Okay, so this is a great question. Would love to know if there are any DI curriculum primarily focusing on comprehension. So I would say reading mastery, there are actually, so reading mastery is one of them. There's Horizons. So there's a website that I'm going to put in the chat. So Nifty, if you Google Nifty, you'll get to the National Institute for Direct Instruction. And then across the top, you'll see, I think there's a link for programs. And then go to that drop down, you'll see a whole bunch of curricula for different content areas. There's social studies, science, math. Go to reading. So this was Nicole. Go to reading and you'll read the descriptions of each of the reading curricula. And then you can pick the one that might suit your needs the best, if there's one that's more comprehension focused. So nifty.org. Okay.
All right, so Suda, if you can click onto the next couple of slides. First of all, if this is your first time attending an MPG webinar, whenever you click on that link to receive your CEU, you'll be prompted to create a new ThinkUp account. You can use any email and password that you would like. If you're a returning guest, make sure you're logging on using the email that you initially signed up with. Otherwise, you'll have multiple accounts and it'll just be harder for you to track your CEUs. If you have questions, you can contact professional development at manhattanpsychologygroup.com, and I will be happy to help you. That is posted in the chat, but I'd be happy to post it again. But Suda, thank you so much for presenting today. I think a lot of people had a lot of questions answered, and I think it was a very informative webinar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Everybody else who had questions remaining that we didn't get to, I will be sending Sudha your questions so that she can answer some of them, and they will be posted on our socials. So you can jot down some of our socials information. If your question is not answered, you can definitely email professional development at Manhattan Psychology Group, and I'd be happy to connect you with Dr. Ramaswamy.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And then if you switch on to the next slide, oh, that's fine.
Whoops.
It's okay, no worries. That is the end of today's presentation. I am going to stay on to help support with any other CEU questions that you might have. Sudha, thank you so much. If you'd
You're
like to stay on, you
welcome.
can. Otherwise, you can sign off.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Okay. So anybody